Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fiction genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Charmed. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, and in the team's effort to try and find Macy, they're going to have to do whatever they can because obviously she's not popping up on the map, so because she's technically not in danger, which I'm curious about that. Is it just because it was the cloaking, or was there some other aspect of just because they were cloaked, maybe it was still kind of, maybe she didn't 100% feel in danger, but whatever the case may be, I think it more so was the cloaking, but maybe there was some hint of like, I don't know, we'll see in the long run what ends up happening in regards of all of that, but Maggie decides like, okay, the only way they're going to be able to get some hint as to where to go, they need Jordan, because the only time she has visions is when she touches Jordan. So I think that's kind of interesting. And obviously it's like, oh, she's apparently, it's like, oh yeah, they set up this whole karaoke thing at Safe Space. It's like, who came up with this stupid idea? Maggie's like, it's not stupid. It's like, she came up with the idea. It's like, she has to come up with like the, like, almost like the team building stuff and like that as assistant manager and stuff like that. So I love that. But then her and Jordan do a duet, which is so interesting, that song choice, because it literally, that duet was recently done in an episode of Titans with Hank and Dawn. So I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I mean, who cares? It's a great song. So like, you know, might as well take advantage of like that being a great duet song. But regardless, we're going on a bit of tangent, and I love that the entire time, like, Maggie's trying to touch him, but he's kind of pulling away, because I didn't know if that was his girlfriend or his wife. I mean, he said, Harry says Mrs., so it's like, oh, I'm assuming that's, I mean, that could just be like, oh, significant other as in Miss, but it could just be like, oh, that's legitimately his wife. Whatever the case may be, it's like, yo, his SO's in the crowd, he's like, stop it, Maggie, stop, but kind of pulling away from her. She's having to constantly touch on him and everything, and it's just like, I even love Harry being like, well, we need to find a way to get you two alone later on, because she only got like a spark of a vision, but it's like, hey, if we get you two alone, you can touch them all over the place. And Mel's like, well, how do we do that without her getting arrested? And it's like, oh, they locked him in an elevator. And I love that Mel is able to knock out the elevator, but her spell's a little too damn good, and it knocks out power in the entire building. So it did lead to some very interesting stuff, because Maggie tries the vision thing again, but it's like, it doesn't work. Tries it with his other hand and notices he has a ring, which I'm like, okay, so is it like, there is some magic to it. So I guess because she doesn't fully have her magic back, maybe that kind of acts as kind of a little bit of an amplifier. It just kind of gives her the spark is there, the ring just kind of amplifies that spark. So like the power's not completely going, they're there. It's just like the light that is their powers is very dim. And I guess touching that ring, and I guess it's kind of like a magical amplifier. Maybe it's kind of similar to how like the tools they had near the end of last season amplified their abilities. Like Mel was able to use the daggers to kind of like not only like freeze time, but even like slow it down. Like it amplified her abilities automatically. So I'm thinking, you know, it's kind of a similar thing in that regard, which I'm curious to kind of circle back to that. Like, it makes you wonder, it's like a magical item. It makes you wonder, does magic run in Jordan's family in some shape or form, or is there something else to that? I mean, it might just be like how Gavin had magic kind of flowing, like it was kind of a part, you know, because of his heritage and everything, like it ran in his family, you know. So maybe that's what that kind of comes down to, like someone in his family was connected to magic, had ties to magic, whatever the case may be. It was kind of neat that they did. I don't know what I'm curious to see what they end up doing with this whole Jordan thing. Like, I'm not really sure if they're setting him up to be like a new SO, like a new person of interest in, you know, Maggie's life. But the fact of the matter is, it's like he's in a committed relationship and everything. Or it might just be the fact is of having a friend outside of all this might be the direction they're going with that. But like the fact is, his dad died when he was like 4. His mom had given him this ring because it was, you know, passed down to his dad, and he's been wearing it ever since he could fit it. And obviously Maggie talks about the fact is like, yeah, she knows kind of what he's going through, because it's like she lost both her parents. And it's like, yeah, you kind of forget that this has all happened in, once again, I always like that when you kind of are able to kind of get a rough time frame of how long a TV show, the events of a TV show. It's been less than a year since, like, over the course of everything, I mean, since like the beginning of the series till now, it's been less than a year in the grand scheme of things. So I think I was reading something that was still saying 2018 and something else I was watching, I think. Regardless, I'm going on a bit of a tangent, but Nevertheless, I think I'm confusing that with Titans because I think the Titans had like a 2018 grave marker when it came to Dick's grave. So I'm like, oh, so I think it's kind of that similar thing. Regardless, I'm always obsessed with time frames of like, oh, how long has it been since so on and so forth? You know, has it been like had it only been? I think they might have referenced how long it's been since season 1's finale. I just don't remember. Regardless, but that is a lot. It's like, yeah, your mom died. Well, she was murdered. Then your dad died. But it's like, well, he wasn't your actual dad, but he was your dad that raised you, and he wasn't the best person. So that learning stuff about him is just kind of like, it's kind of rough, you know. Even kind of confiding in Jordan, like, hey, there's some guy that's after us, and the fact of the matter is, if he finds me and my sisters, you know, he could hurt us or do worse. But Jordan's like, hey, if you ever need it, I'm there. You need a place to stay, need someone to throw a punch, I'm there for you. I'm like, oh, that's sweet. But but when Maggie puts on a ring, she sees a vision of Jordan kind of, it looks like he might have, I don't know if that was him being attacked / killed or what, but now Maggie later on, it's like, well, I don't know whether he's someone that, like, I saw that vision, she doesn't know if he's someone that's in danger or someone we are in danger of. So the question is like, well, who flung him? My mind immediately thinks like, well, I would assume it was someone with telekinesis, so it's either Mel because he's a danger, or Abigail because he got away and he was trying to protect Maggie and ends up getting flown. So maybe that's what that turns into. But yeah. I'm curious to find out more about that ring situation to see if it is what I think it is or if it ends up being something else. So, at the same time, you know, obviously, you know, Mel and Harry end up getting the address and they go to a bar, which it's so interesting. I guess because he's a Darklighter, or maybe people don't know what he is. Maybe he just kicks it with the demons and they just kind of accept it thinking he is one. But he goes by the name Jimmy and whatnot. So I'm like, I'm curious though. In a grand scheme of things, like if he, I don't know, because I mean, I guess Darklighters aren't a well-known thing, so I guess he can just slip through without, you know, drawing too much attention, because, you know, he is he's the more like, as you know, Harry kind of puts it, he's the id, like all his like compulsions and all his desire, like the side of him that like, there's a part of your brain that stops you from like doing yourself being like, oh, this is why you shouldn't do this because there's consequences. There's the balance in your brain. He represents all the side of Harry that's just like pure desire, pure, I want something, I'm gonna go get it, I'm gonna do whatever I want to, screw the consequences. That's kind of what he represents. Not just necessarily the evil, yes, sure, but all the more like, I guess could be considered a more evil sides of yourself, I guess, if you want to get technical about it. I mean, it's almost like a misunderstood evil, I guess, if you really want to think about it. But they go to a bar and everything, but Jimmy's got a debt to pay, so it's like, okay, play you in a game of poker, but Harry doesn't know anything about poker. And I think that in itself is kind of an interesting thing we'll kind of get to in a second. But there's the whole situation with Mel helping him out, being invisible, and it's like, oh, and they end up winning the game. It's like, yeah, but the spell wears off, so it's actually kind of sad when you actually, well, a little sad when you actually think about it, because Mel explains it later on. Their dad taught her how to play poker by using M&Ms, and it's like, I think sometimes he'd lose just so I could keep all the candy. And Maggie's like, see, he wasn't all bad, which is like, I think this might be a way, Maggie's learning more about their dad, but I think it might be an opportunity for Mel to be like, yeah, he had his issues, but he wasn't all bad. He was still, you know, my dad after all, because let's not forget, you know, he's not Maggie's dad. I mean, even though he raised Maggie, that wasn't her dad. You know, he was fully Mel's dad, which, you know, I think maybe because of her skewed view of him, you know, maybe she, you know, you have a tendency, you know, to, you know, there was a lot of bad with her dad, but I think like it kind of outshines the little bit of good, you know, it kind of drowns it out. So I think that's something maybe Mel might kind of deal with a little bit more this season, maybe. I don't know, because their dad isn't something, it came up last season, sure, but it wasn't like the biggest thing. But the fact is they're delving into it now, especially now that he's gone, you know, I think, you know, I'm curious to see, you know, what ends up happening because of that. But I am curious, like, especially now that, like, the demons know that there's someone else out there with Jimmy's face. It's like, oh, you're a shapeshifter, like, what's your whole deal? So it's like, well, because I'm sure they're under the impression all the Whitelighters are dead. Well, because I'm assuming only a few demons know that the Charmed ones are actually alive. So I think it's the same thing of like, well, they all know that the demons know all the elders are dead, so they probably think all the Whitelighters are dead, so they probably don't think much of it. what I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. It didn't seem like they really recognize him. And it's not even like they recognize him as a Whitelighter hit. So maybe it's because his powers aren't fully back, which we do see Harry. He's like, it's still, he can access his powers now, but it takes a big toll out of him. So maybe like the Whitelighter aspect of him isn't bright enough, but it might also be because the elders are gone and because he's cut ties with them. He's a Whitelighter, sure, but maybe the essence of a Whitelighter doesn't shine as brightly because the elders are gone. Maybe not. We'll kind of have to wait and see in that regard. But on the other side of things, we have Macy, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. And it's like, oh, they're in the house and everything. It's like, I knew it was the, Darklighter pretending, but it was like, oh, you're trying to make her feel comfortable and at home. I'm like, oh, this isn't because of orders. You're doing this on your own. And he's making dinner and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, I was like, I not even like him covering bases. I was like, yeah, actually, the person we went off with, that was a Darklighter. But me and your sisters, we came to rescue. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty smart of you, not making it seem like, oh, like you're just like, no, you've been out for 2 days and stuff like that. Regardless, that was interesting. But Macy immediately kind of picks it up of like, you're not Harry. Just little stuff here and there, and, she was trying to catch him to be 100% sure whether or not it was him. And she's like, oh yeah, that red dress that you really like, I'm gonna go put it on and everything. She tried to leave, but the door was locked and impossible to leave. And then he ends up being like, oh, there you are, trying to escape. I like that. I like the way it looked, though, when she kind of stuck her hand out, and it was like kind of like, oh, what's on the other side of that? But it turns out the whole place was an illusion. So I thought that was, fascinating, especially because he ends up dropping the illusion, because it's like, well, no more for pretenses. It's like, it turns out, really interestingly enough, like understanding why he's doing all that he's doing. And it's like, oh, he's after Macy, because obviously him and Harry have feelings. They share the same feelings for Macy. So for him, it's like, oh, because obviously his master is a collector, collecting like the top specials, like whether it be like, it's like almost like a supernatural zoo of all the like special creatures. Obviously a lot got set free last episode. I'm curious how that's going to flow with things. But the whole fact is, it's like, my master, and he was like, whoever said it was a he, so referring to the fact is his master is a she. The fact is that, it turns into a circumstance of like, he wanted to turn Maggie and Mel over, hoping that would be enough, because it's like, then he can get his own freedom and he can take Macy with him, and then it's like we can kind of start our lives and stuff like that. And I thought that was so fascinating, because she was getting pissed at him. It's like, don't talk about Harry, don't even say his name. It's like, why? The fact of the matter is, you like me more because I'm better than him, which is almost kind of like this almost inferiority complex. I'm sorry, I struggle with that word so much. He feels inferior. I have to say it like that because I cannot say that word right without struggling. But he feels inferior just because it's like, but he has to feel better. He's like, no, I'm better than him in every way. You like me better than him. I know it because of the dreams and everything. Which even he's like, yeah, I prefer kind of talking through us this way rather than the dreams and everything. Even the tools and weaponry he has, it was kind of given to him by his master and whatnot. So it was kind of interesting to know. It's almost like a Romeo and Juliet story he's trying to create for him and Macy. I thought that was kind of fascinating. And obviously Macy kind of plays into that by being like, hey, I found another way we can get your freedom and we can be together by offering your master something else. How about instead of my sisters, we give him someone like Abigail? She's a rarity. She's a witch and a demon. So I was like, she's kind of a special breed, which obviously my mind keeps going to, is it Abigail that's his master? Especially because they reference is your master. Who said it's a he? So it might be a she. Which, I mean, who's to say it is Abigail? Maybe it's not. Because we haven't seen her. You don't think it's Jada, do you? I mean, we haven't seen hide nor hair of Jada since last. Well, then why would you going through that trouble? Especially because it's like, well, especially if it included Mel. And no, it can't be, because Jada likes Mel. So I was like, well, I wonder who her dad was then. If her dad's, because she's half Whitelighter, so it's like, makes you wonder, like, I was about to say, not unless Jada has a dark side. I mean, I wouldn't think so, because she isn't born like other Whitelighters were. Or at least if she was, like, she's a page, where she's half of her parents' genes go down to her. Which also begs the question, that was an element we never even touched on last season either. Like, her parents, like, what's up with that? I don't know. Like I said, whoever it was would have to have knowledge of, like, the elders and everything that they do. I mean, it wouldn't make sense. Well, because if, she is a witch, I feel like she would, Abigail would know about the elders and everything. I mean, to be fair, we know Jada did. Not unless we're dealing with someone who's... Well, because Jada's, like, the only one left of the Sarkana, right? So it's like... I don't know. Like, it might be someone else entirely. But I feel like it was all setting up to be Abigail, but maybe not. And I've thrown out Jada, but I kind of feel like, if anything, I lean more towards Abigail than I would Jada. But that just kind of put it in the back of my mind. But I'm like, I don't think Jada would have a reason to kind of go to the extent she does. Even if the, elders are going, it's kind of like, oh, she didn't like the way the elders ran things. Like, why would she go as far as she's going, Because she's basically using him to kill witches. So I feel like Abigail hates witches and demons, because witches and demons kind of basically shunned her for being what she is, because probably when she looks at demons, she probably just thinks of her father who turned her away, and probably looks at witches of the community that turned her away. She felt she didn't belong in any world, so that's why I lean more towards her. But we'll see in the long run. Is it just purely like being a collector, or is there some, like I said, it's probably most likely going to end up being someone new. But once again, I'm going on a tangent and all that. But yeah, because I mean, I think she was also trying to test and see by his response of like, oh, let's turn in Abigail. But he never said anything. But it seemed like he was going along with it. It makes it seem like it might not be Abigail. I feel like he would have been like, huh. He would have had some remark, or at least some facial expression being like, but his facial expression makes him go like he was listening to the idea. So it's like his master isn't Abigail. I don't know. We'll see. So, but Macy decides, she was just doing that to get close to him to get the stone so she can activate her powers again. Luckily, Harry and Mel show up. He's able to get them both out of there, but he's like, no, this is my dark half, so I've got to deal with it. So he teleports back. And I think Harry pretty much held his own very nicely against his Darklighter. It's like, yo. And I think it's kind of neat. Like, I don't know. I feel like you're seeing like a little smidge of a dark side in Harry, but I guess not really. I mean, because all of that darkness is in him, but I love he puts the that venom on him, and it makes Darklighter Harry not be able to use his powers. And he's like, yeah, it has a little nasty side effect. And he takes the blade, and he's like, the fact is, no matter what you do, she'll never, basically saying like, I'm the one she would want. Like, who you are will never be good enough. You'll never be enough for her. And he's like, goodbye, Harry, and kills his other half. Which immediately my brain went, I was like, well, because his connection to the because his connection with the elders were severed, so he was able to come back. I'm like, wouldn't his Darklighter be able to come back too? Totally. Because I guess as long as Harry's alive, his Darklighter can come back, because he falls under the same rules that Harry does. I guess the only way Harry can get rid of him is if they fuse back together. And I thought this was such an interesting moment, because for Harry, he talks about the fact that it's like, oh, humans, they're light and they're darkness. That's what makes us, and he has to stop. What makes them so interesting, what makes him so complete. And now his dark half is gone, he'll never be complete. And even talking to Macy, he does wonder sometimes. He's like, if who he would be if both of sides of him were together, because he remembers who he was. It's like, oh, he had a whole other family and everything, and it's pissed his wife off. And it's like, so he saw in his mind, it's like, I know what kind of despicable person I was, but it's like, which, those are just memories and stuff like that. And he still doesn't have the full scope of his entire life. So it puts him in this situation of like, he doesn't know what to quite make of it, And I think that's kind of a, fascinating thing to even, because even with all that light in you, it's sad that, there's a part of him that probably feels like he feels incomplete without his dark half, knowing that there's another half of him that's out there. That, and especially now, it's like all that I was gone. And it's like, he's asking Macy who he was. It's like, he was charming. He was selfish. He was completely ruled by his own, wants and desires. And I think for Harry, it's like, did I do the right? It's like, but Macy was like, you did the right thing by doing that. And then he looks at her and he's like, I always do. And he walks away. And that line in itself is so impactful, because it's like the right thing, meaning like, being with Macy would be the wrong thing. It's like, you're under my charge, you're my protection, like crossing that line. I think despite how Harry feels, he's not willing to cross that line. Maybe if he had that darker side of himself, because of being this, angelic, because he was like, maybe my angelic nature could help balance that sinner side, or maybe his sinner side would just drag me down. But without that other side of himself, he's not willing to take those chances, maybe because of being the white lighter that he is, and, kind of feeling bad about it. I like Harry being, like, basically all of Harry's good nature makes him think, like, no, I can't be with Macy. It'd be wrong. Despite how I feel, maybe she feels the same way, but maybe he's even taking to heart what the Darklighter said of, like, you'll never be enough, because he'll never have, like, what's the word I'm looking for? The drive to push himself to go forward with that, to give into his desires. So I think that's going to be an interesting, because I was curious to see where things would kind of go from here. Especially it's kind of that awkward thing of like, oh, like Mel and Maggie know both how Macy and Harry both feel about each other, and I think it's going to be this awkward thing of like, you two like each other, but are you going to do anything? I think that's going to turn into something, and I think there is a part of Macy that probably does kind of desire like that side of Harry, because it's kind of like, oh, his essentially almost like, oh, it's his bad boy side. I know I'm being stereotypical, but like, that's the best way I can fit it, of like, because that's the side of Harry that kind of wants to take chances, and whereas the other Harry, it takes two sides to be complete. You need both your side that tells you to kind of take chances, be daring, but all your other side that, tells you to kind of be safe, So that's the complicated situation Harry finds himself in. I think that's so fascinating. But it's not like his Darklighter side is dead. It's not like this is over. They think it is, but... And it looks like, I couldn't tell, I didn't actually take note, but I don't know if he had the scar anymore, so I don't know if that's going to be their way to be able to distinguish between the two. Maybe for him, it's like, has he given up completely on Macy? Maybe, maybe not. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. I'm interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.